story.
U.S. leaders say they're using every tool to convince U.S. citizens not to travel overseas to become jihadists. More than 100 Americans are believed to be fighting for ISIS and other militant groups in Syria. Their increasing strength is being compared to al-Qaeda leading up to the 9/11 attacks.
They may have again a place to organize a major attack on the United States, and that's very serious.
ISIS presents the greatest threat that we've seen since 9/11.
Overall, thousands of Westerners have joined the fighting in Iraq and Syria on the side of ISIS. House Homeland Security Chair Congressman Michael McCaul says keeping the fighting overseas through military pressure and political reform is crucial.
They are true jihadists, but they have greater access to Turkey, Western Europe. They have legal travel documents. Some of them have already traveled to the United States and back, one a suicide bomber. Intelligence officials and myself are very concerned about an imminent attack that could happen in the United States if we don't stop them overseas.
Earlier this summer, the Syrian al-Qaeda group said an American from Florida carried out a suicide bomb attack for them. He released this threatening video against the United States.
You think you are safe? You are not safe.
Meanwhile, a desperate mother appeals to ISIS jihadists to free her kidnapped son, another American journalist, Steven Sotloff.
Please release my child.
President Obama authorized surveillance flights over Syria. U.S. officials say they need more information before launching airstrikes against ISIS headquarters there. The terrorist group has been gaining ground in Iraq and Syria, and now with the aid of American jihadists, the question is not if ISIS is a threat to the United States, but how great of a threat to the American home front. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck is with us. Eric, the president said they were the JV team, this ISIS. What are they?
Well, Pat, they are the most powerful and most dangerous Islamic terrorist group in the world, and they are an imminent threat to the United States, Pat. Up to 300 Americans have traveled to Syria, according to U.S. intelligence officials, to join up with this group. And, Pat, if they don't blow themselves up in Syria, one day the fear is they will return here. And when these guys come back to the United States, Pat, they're not going to get a job at a gas station or go back to school and get their bachelor's degree. They will be here to establish a sleeper cell to strike on American soil. We have some 3,000 Westerners who've traveled to Syria and Iraq to join this group. And by the way, these Western passport holders do not need a visa to come to the United States. And we also have the small matter, Pat, of that porous southern border, which I can assure you ISIS is looking at with eyes wide open.
Eric, Terry and I were talking before the show. What is it that motivates these people? These are Americans. They grew up there. The others, some of them were Britons. I mean, the one that took the head of that guy off is a Brit. I mean, he grew up in Great Britain, in England. They enjoyed all the privileges of a free society. What motivates these guys?
But I think if you have a dark side to you and you're looking for the darkest thing there's nothing darker than jihad in this day and age. I'll give you an example. This American who was just killed, U.S. citizen, killed fighting alongside ISIS this week. He was a guy, Pat, who was a drifter, who apparently had no direction in life, converted to Islam. All of a sudden, he found meaning in the global jihad, these charismatic clerics, these radical imams. And ISIS in particular, Pat, is very adept at using YouTube, using social media to recruit. These charismatic imams tell these misguided souls throughout the world that if you join the jihad, you will be a part of something big. You will matter. And the United States that has kept you down, that has oppressed you, you can strike back against. I think another wrinkle here is with this younger generation, Pat, they call it jihadi cool, if you can believe that. They blend hip-hop culture, rap music, with jihad in these YouTube videos, on Facebook, on Twitter, and that becomes very attractive to these twisted young people, many of them, Pat, who grew up playing these violent video games. They go over there, they think beheading is a cool thing.
They've got so much money, too. I understand they picked up a bank in Mosul, got a lot of money there, but are they collecting taxes for these areas that they're in charge of, or is it oil revenue? Where are they getting their money?
Pat, it's a combination. First of all, they are collecting taxes under Sharia law in the areas they control, especially under non-Muslims. Either you pay an exorbitant tax, you convert, or you die. That's the choices ISIS is laying out to Christians in the Middle East. In terms of their funding, they're getting local funding and global funding. That's what makes them so dangerous. On the local level, Pat, they have conquered some oil fields in northern Iraq and Syria, and what they're doing is they're selling that crude oil on the black market throughout the Middle East in places like Turkey, Iran, Syria. So they're making up to $2 million a day in that illicit oil trade, according to some reports. Also, they have ransoms, kidnappings. We saw, unfortunately, James Foley beheaded last week. Some Europeans who they've captured, Pat. European countries have paid high ransoms to get their citizens back. That's another way. And as you mentioned, the banks. When they conquered the bank in Mosul, Iraq, they seized some $500 million in assets. We've never seen a richer terrorist organization. This is not just a terrorist group. This is a terrorist army. Real quick here, Pat, also, when it comes to global funding, wealthy private donors in places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, supposed U.S. allies are also pouring money into ISIS.
One last question. The Obama administration, Senator McCain says they're feckless. They didn't pick up the clues to what this organization was. How about now? General Dempsey said if we're going to crush it, we've got to hit Syria. Is the administration going to do what they need to do?
Pat, that's a great question, because last week, Chuck Hagel, the defense secretary, and the Joint Chiefs, Martin Dempsey, said, look, this is an imminent threat. They must be defeated now. Then over the weekend, they kind of changed their tune and said, look, it's more of a regional threat, not an imminent threat to the United States. Yesterday, the press secretary, Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, when he was pressed on whether President Obama wants to defeat ISIS, he was asked, Pat, in 2 or 3 different ways. He couldn't answer. Then at the end, he said, oh, of course we want to defeat ISIS. So it's unclear right now. President Obama is discussing some more about what he wants to do about this group. I do think, Pat, if you really want to smash ISIS, and we need to smash them before they strike here, Syria is where their stronghold is, particularly the city of Raqqa in eastern Syria. But I don't know that you can do it with air power alone.
Eric, thank you so much. Stay with it. We appreciate your insightful analysis.